I said, "Is Emily alive?" He said, "No." And I asked, "Did you hurt her?" And he said, "Yes."
Imagine planning a romantic anniversary trip with the person you love most. You pack your bags, hit the road, and tell your family you'll be back in just a few days. But only one of you returns. The other is found dead, and the husband has a story investigators don't believe. This is the Joseph Ferlazzo case, one of the most disturbing true crime cases in recent years. What began as a romantic anniversary trip with Emily Ferlazzo quickly became a chilling Vermont murder investigation involving deception, forensic evidence, a missing persons case, and a first-degree murder conviction that shocked many who followed the story. What really happened inside that camper? How did a young couple celebrating their first wedding anniversary become the center of one of Vermont's most closely watched homicide investigations? Because this case gets darker with every passing hour. Before we get into it, if you're new here, this is the True Crime Room. I cover cases like this every week, so if you don't want to miss the next one, go ahead and hit subscribe now. Before this becomes the story of Joseph Ferlazzo, I want you to know who Emily Ferlazzo was. True crime has a bad habit of turning victims into footnotes, reducing them to evidence instead of people. Emily deserves better than that. Emily Ferlazzo was only 22 years old. She worked as a registered nurse, a profession built around caring for people during some of the hardest moments of their lives. Family and friends described her as compassionate, kind, resilient, and full of life. She loved singing, adored children, and dreamed of becoming a mother one day. People who knew Emily didn't remember someone who faded into the background. They remembered someone who brought warmth into every room she entered. In October 2020, Emily married Joseph Ferlazzo, a tattoo artist more than a decade older than she was. The couple lived in New Hampshire, where Emily remained close to her family. They appeared to be building a normal newlywed life together. But according to Emily's mother, Adrienne Bass, the marriage looked very different behind closed doors. During the Joseph Ferlazzo murder trial, Adrienne described a relationship marked by controlling behavior and a history of domestic violence. She told the court that her daughter had been living with problems few people outside the marriage ever saw.
Didn't ever actually witness any of it. However, she did report to us that he had abused her, and she did have bruises on her body, injuries that she wouldn't have had otherwise. So,
and we suspected abuse, but we hadn't gotten it proven or ready to go to police or anything.
Exactly 1 year after their wedding, Joseph and Emily decided to celebrate their anniversary with a road trip. The couple traveled in their converted Chevrolet Express camper van, embracing the growing van life lifestyle that had become popular across the United States. Their destination was Bolton, Vermont, where Joseph's sister and her boyfriend had rented an Airbnb near Bolton Valley Ski Resort. The plan seemed simple: spend a quiet anniversary together, celebrate with family, then head home. That anniversary trip would become the beginning of one of Vermont's most shocking murder investigations, and the Joseph Ferlazzo case would soon capture national attention. On the evening of October 15, 2021, Joseph Ferlazzo and Emily Ferlazzo arrived in Bolton, Vermont, where they planned to celebrate the first anniversary of their marriage. They spent part of the evening with Joseph's sister and her boyfriend, who had rented an Airbnb nearby. It was Emily's first time meeting this side of Joseph's family, and by every outward appearance, the anniversary trip was unfolding exactly as planned. At some point during the evening, according to Joseph, the couple had been drinking. Then everyone went their separate ways. Joseph and Emily returned alone to their camper, and that tiny camper would soon become the scene of one of Vermont's most disturbing homicide investigations. What happened inside that vehicle has remained the central question in the Joseph Ferlazzo case ever since. According to Joseph's original account, an argument erupted after they were alone. He later claimed Emily became physically aggressive, punching and kicking him during the confrontation. He said the argument eventually ended. Emily lay down inside the camper, and several minutes passed. Then Joseph picked up his Glock handgun. He climbed on top of his wife and fired 2 shots into her head. But prosecutors presented a very different timeline during the Joseph Ferlazzo murder trial. The argument wasn't about physical violence at all. Instead, investigators believed the confrontation began after Emily told Joseph she no longer wanted to remain married. That conversation, prosecutors argued, ended with Joseph murdering his wife. The forensic evidence would ultimately support that conclusion. What happened next shocked even experienced investigators. Joseph placed a garbage bag over Emily Ferlazzo's head before moving her body into the small bathroom inside the camper van. Then, less than 24 hours later, he joined his sister and her boyfriend for breakfast. Nothing about his behavior suggested that, only hours earlier, his wife had been killed inside the camper parked nearby. When Judge John Pocht later sentenced Joseph Ferlazzo, one word stood out in his description of the defendant: detachment. The judge described a man capable of calmly giving a client a 3-hour tattoo, sharing breakfast with family, and carrying on ordinary conversations, while hiding an unimaginable crime. Investigators later determined that somewhere between 12 and 15 hours after Emily's death, Joseph returned to the camper bathroom with a handsaw. There he dismembered Emily Ferlazzo's body. Her remains were placed into 8 separate black garbage bags and left inside the camper's bathroom. The camper itself never became an abandoned crime scene. Joseph continued living in it. He continued driving it. And all the while, Emily's remains remained only a few feet away, as he began constructing a story that investigators would later describe as entirely false. The killing was over. The cover-up had just begun. By the morning after the killing, the Joseph Ferlazzo case had already entered its next phase. The murder was over. Now came the deception. Joseph Ferlazzo began telling Emily's family a story that investigators would later prove was false. He claimed the couple had argued near Bolton Valley Ski Resort in Bolton, Vermont, and said Emily had gotten out of the camper and walked away along the road. According to Joseph, he searched for her but couldn't find her. That explanation became the foundation of a carefully constructed cover-up.
Hey, so, I just got off the phone with your father-in-law, and it sounds like there's some concern about maybe where Emily may be. Okay, what can you... it sounds like you... What do we know at this point, I guess? Or what can you tell me?
She was with me, and she said she was gonna get an Uber. So she asked me to drop her off in a parking lot, and I dropped her off. She was wearing like white sneakers and like ripped blue jeans and like a black top with long sleeves and like a lightweight. I went to the gas station, grabbed her a Coke, and went back. She had already been picked up. I'm looking for her, I couldn't find her. And I haven't been able to make contact with her since that was like Saturday afternoon.
So after you just noticed she was gone, you just decided to just leave, I guess?
I drove up and down the road looking to see if she started down the road. And I drove up and down too.
Over the next 4 days, Joseph sent text messages and made phone calls designed to make him appear like a desperate husband searching for his missing wife. Investigators would later reconstruct this timeline message by message through cell phone records, interviews, and digital evidence gathered during the murder investigation. Meanwhile, Emily Ferlazzo's parents knew something wasn't right. As the hours turned into days, they reported their daughter missing. The case quickly shifted from a missing persons investigation into something much more sinister. The timing was impossible to ignore. Only weeks earlier, the disappearance of Gabby Petito had dominated headlines across the United States. Prosecutors would later say that the intense national attention surrounding that case helped law enforcement move quickly when Emily disappeared, allowing investigators to uncover critical evidence before valuable time was lost. But while Joseph continued pretending to search for his wife, he made one devastating mistake. At some point during those 4 days, Joseph confessed to a friend. He admitted that he had killed Emily. There was no elaborate explanation, no attempt to justify what happened.
I said, "Is Emily alive?" He said, "No." And I asked, "Did you hurt her?" And he said, "Yes."
According to testimony presented during the Joseph Ferlazzo trial, the admission was so direct that the friend immediately ordered Joseph out of the vehicle. Think about that for a moment. Before detectives uncovered the truth, before investigators searched the camper, before Emily's body was discovered, Joseph had already admitted the killing to someone else. Yet he continued lying to Emily's family. He continued pretending she was missing. And he continued driving across state lines, with her remains still inside the camper. Eventually, investigators caught up with him. 4 days after Emily's murder, a Vermont State Police trooper located Joseph Ferlazzo at a convenience store in St. Albans. He was taken into custody without incident. Detectives immediately obtained a search warrant for the camper van. What they discovered inside would become some of the most disturbing evidence presented during the Joseph Ferlazzo murder trial. In the camper's bathroom, investigators found 8 black garbage bags. The first 2 contained bedding, clothing, and the throw pillow prosecutors said had been used to suppress the sound of the gunshots. The remaining 6 contained Emily Ferlazzo's dismembered remains. Detectives also recovered a handsaw, a knife stained with what appeared to be blood, a bottle of bleach, and Emily's engagement ring sitting inside a cup holder, also stained with reddish-brown material, later examined as part of the forensic investigation. Every new piece of evidence strengthened the prosecution's timeline. Every discovery made Joseph's missing person story harder to believe. There was, however, one small piece of relief amid the horror. Remington, who had initially disappeared along with Emily, was eventually found safe at the home of one of Joseph's friends. Soon afterward, detectives sat Joseph Ferlazzo down for an interview that lasted more than 2 hours. During that recorded interview, Joseph admitted that he had shot and killed his wife.
As soon as I put the vehicle in park, my wife went completely berserk, completely psychotic. And I shot her. That's the result of that. And now here we are. So,
all right. Can you, where did that happen?
Bolton, Vermont.
Okay. All right. So,
But there's one detail investigators would later return to again and again. During that entire confession, Joseph never claimed self-defense. He never said Emily threatened him with a gun. He never described fearing for his life. Those claims wouldn't appear until years later, during the Joseph Ferlazzo trial. And by then, prosecutors believed the evidence had already told a very different story. Quick pause before we get into the trial. If this case has you hooked so far, drop a comment and let me know. It genuinely helps this channel grow, and I read everyone. More than 3 years after Emily Ferlazzo was killed, the Joseph Ferlazzo murder trial finally began. In December 2024, jurors gathered inside Chittenden County Superior Court in Burlington, Vermont, to decide one question that would define the entire Joseph Ferlazzo case. Was this murder or self-defense? Prosecutors Sarah George and Sally Adams argued that the evidence told a clear story. Joseph Ferlazzo didn't simply kill his wife, then spent 4 days covering it up. Throughout the murder trial, prosecutors carefully walked the jury through every hour of Joseph's movements after Emily's death. To emphasize one chilling detail, Sarah George placed a timer in front of the courtroom. She wanted jurors to understand exactly how much time Joseph had between shooting Emily and dismembering her body. Hours to think, hours to leave, hours to call for help. Instead, prosecutors argued, he chose something else entirely. The state presented 15 witnesses. One by one, investigators, forensic experts, detectives, and medical professionals reconstructed the final hours of Emily Ferlazzo's life. Medical examiner Dr. Stephen Shapiro testified that Emily had been shot twice in the head. After her death, her body had been stabbed approximately 16 to 18 times during the dismemberment process. Her death was officially ruled a homicide. Forensic evidence became one of the strongest parts of the prosecution's case. DNA recovered from the knife matched Emily Ferlazzo. A fired bullet recovered inside the camper contained fabric embedded in its tip, consistent with having passed through the red throw pillow prosecutors said Joseph used to suppress the sound of the gunshots. Detective Sergeant Amy Nolan then described what investigators found inside each of the 8 garbage bags recovered from the camper bathroom. Every item, every photograph, every piece of evidence added another layer to the prosecution's timeline. Then it was the defense's turn, and they called only one witness, Joseph Ferlazzo. For the very first time in any formal legal proceeding, Joseph told the jury a completely different version of what happened inside the camper. He claimed Emily had pulled a Taurus handgun from behind a pillow. According to Joseph, she looked at him and said, "That's it, you're dead." He testified that he believed his life was in danger, so he fired first. Joseph also introduced another claim jurors had never heard before. He testified that he and Emily had been involved in a polyamorous relationship, and that their marriage had been marked by repeated physical violence. The obvious question quickly followed. If any of that were true, why hadn't he told police during the 2-hour interview he gave only 4 days after Emily's death? Joseph's answer surprised many in the courtroom. He claimed he didn't remember speaking to detectives at all. According to his testimony, those memories only returned years later through what he described as flashbacks. He also claimed he remembered only a single flash of the dismemberment, cutting into Emily's leg. Everything else, he said, was gone. Prosecutor Sally Adams wasn't convinced. During a tense cross-examination, she walked Joseph through the timeline investigators had already established. The phone calls, the text messages, breakfast with his sister, driving across state lines, the fabricated search for Emily. Again and again, Joseph answered with the same words, "I don't remember." Finally, Adams looked directly at him and said, "And you're lying today." The courtroom fell silent. The prosecution also pointed to crime scene photographs showing no visible injuries on Joseph's body. No bruises, no cuts. No physical evidence supporting his claim that Emily had violently attacked him before the shooting. Closing arguments distilled the Joseph Ferlazzo trial into 2 completely different versions of the same night. The defense argued Joseph had lived through years of abuse and trauma. The prosecution argued that his story had changed only after years of knowing exactly what evidence investigators had against him. The jury deliberated for roughly 5 hours over 2 days. At one point, they asked to hear Joseph's testimony again, specifically the portion describing what happened after Joseph's sister and her boyfriend left the camper that night. Jurors listened carefully. Then they returned to deliberate once more. When they came back into the courtroom, their decision was unanimous. Guilty. Joseph Ferlazzo was convicted of first-degree murder. The jury rejected his claim of self-defense. After more than 3 years, the criminal trial was over. But one final chapter still remained. Sentencing. By April 2025, the Joseph Ferlazzo case had reached its final stage. After the guilty verdict, the courtroom shifted away from proving what happened. Now the focus was on one question. What sentence should Joseph Ferlazzo receive for murdering Emily Ferlazzo? The defense asked the court for mercy. Joseph's attorney, Margaret Janch, reminded the judge that her client had no prior criminal record. She called forensic psychologist Dr. Thomas Powell, who testified that Joseph met the criteria for severe substance abuse and displayed what he described as elements of a personality disorder. The defense also presented several character references. Letters were read from Joseph's brother, his sister-in-law, longtime friends, and even a former cellmate. One phrase stood out. The former inmate described Joseph as the epitome of level-headed and rational, praising what he believed was Joseph's commitment to personal growth. It's a striking statement, because prosecutors argued the evidence showed a man who calmly murdered his wife, spent hours with her body, dismembered her remains, created an elaborate cover-up, and then lied to investigators and Emily's family for 4 days. The prosecution wasn't asking for sympathy. They were asking for accountability. State prosecutors requested a sentence of 50 years to life in prison. The defense asked the court for 15 years. Then came the victim impact statements. For many people following the Joseph Ferlazzo murder case, these became the most heartbreaking moments of the entire trial. Emily Ferlazzo's mother, Adrienne Bass, addressed the court through a video presentation filled with family photographs and home videos. She never once spoke Joseph's name. Instead, she referred to him only as the convicted. She described Emily as compassionate, loving, and full of hope. Someone who dreamed of becoming a mother. Someone whose future was stolen. Then Adrienne said something that left the courtroom in silence. She listed all the roles Emily had held during her short life: daughter, big sister, granddaughter, niece, friend. Then she listed the titles Emily would never have the chance to earn: mother, aunt, grandmother. Those futures, she said, ended the night Emily was murdered. Emily's father, David Bass, also spoke. He told the court that losing his daughter had shattered his family. But what haunted him almost as much were the years that followed. The lies, the investigation, the trial, the waiting. He said those years had left him living with PTSD. The courtroom also heard a song written by Emily's best friend and watched another tribute, celebrating her life. Then, Joseph Ferlazzo was given an opportunity to speak. He addressed Adrienne directly. Before he could finish, she quietly stood up, walked out of the courtroom, and several members of Emily's family followed her. Joseph told the court he thought about the murder every day. He said it haunted him. Then he made one statement that immediately drew attention: "This event doesn't define me." Judge John Pox strongly disagreed with much of Joseph's testimony. He said the evidence presented throughout the Joseph Ferlazzo trial left the court with utter certainty that Joseph's account was not believable. The judge described the murder as extremely aggravated, pointing to several factors: the violence, the dismemberment, the elaborate cover-up, the repeated lies, and Joseph's continued attempts to shift responsibility onto Emily without evidence. Then the sentence was announced: 42.5 years to life in prison. Before ending the hearing, Judge Pocht offered one final remark. He told Joseph there were still opportunities to do good while incarcerated. That prison could still become a place for personal growth. Joseph's attorney confirmed an appeal would automatically move forward through the Vermont Supreme Court, as required in life sentence cases. She argued there were issues raised during the trial that deserved review. Prosecutor Sarah George disagreed. She said Joseph's testimony had simply become another attempt to damage Emily's reputation after her death. The criminal conviction may have ended the trial, but it wasn't the only judgment Joseph Ferlazzo faced. Even before the murder trial concluded, a civil court had already ordered him to pay $1.5 million to Emily Ferlazzo's family in a wrongful death lawsuit. As of today, Joseph Ferlazzo remains in prison while his appeal continues through Vermont's court system. For Emily's family, the legal process may still be ongoing, but nothing can restore the future they lost. When people remember the Joseph Ferlazzo case, many focus on the dismemberment. Others remember the 4-day cover-up. Some remember the courtroom testimony, but what stays with me most is how ordinary it all appeared at the beginning. A young married couple, a camper van, a weekend anniversary trip, a celebration that should have created happy memories. Instead, it became one of Vermont's most disturbing murder investigations. For 4 days, investigators believed they were searching for a missing woman. Emily's family believed she was still alive. Joseph Ferlazzo answered phone calls. He sent text messages. He spoke with loved ones. He acted like a worried husband, all while knowing exactly where Emily was. The truth eventually caught up with him. Forensic evidence, digital evidence, witness testimony, and ultimately, a jury that rejected his explanation and found him guilty of first-degree murder. Today, Joseph Ferlazzo remains in prison serving a sentence of 42.5 years to life, while his appeal continues through Vermont's legal system. Emily Ferlazzo never got the future she dreamed about. She never became the mother she hoped to be. She never got the chance to celebrate another anniversary. And for the people who loved her, that loss can never truly be measured by a verdict or a prison sentence. The Joseph Ferlazzo case is more than another true crime story. It's a reminder of how quickly trust can become tragedy, and how even the most carefully constructed lies eventually collapse under the weight of the truth. Thank you for watching The True Crime Room. If you found this documentary informative and respectful to Emily's memory, consider subscribing for more carefully researched true crime documentaries every week. And if you'd like to share your thoughts on this case, I'd love to hear them in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious and stay safe.